Hey friends, today we're going to talk about attribution in digital marketing. This is a very interesting topic because everyone has their own perspective on it. It depends who you ask. Everyone has their own understanding of attribution and what might have caused a conversion or a sale from a business point of view. So we're going to talk about what attribution is, what attribution isn't, the different types of attribution models, and then finally, what's the actual insight that we should take from attribution. So first of all, what is attribution? Attribution in the context of digital marketing refers to the process of identifying a set of user actions or conversion points that contribute to a desired outcome. And what that looks like is someone could be purchasing from your website, it could be someone downloading a PDF or signing to an account, or maybe taking a desired action you want them within the app, or it could be a specific event that someone takes within your website or your app. The goal of attribution is to determine which channels, campaigns, or strategies are most effective in leading to a conversion. But more importantly, what that really means is being able to have some kind of oversight over what works, what doesn't work, so you can better allocate energy and advertising spend or marketing spend to that specific channel. If you're seeing more success in Facebook ads, but you're not seeing so much success within SEO, you'd probably as a business have more efforts or deploy more efforts within paid advertising, because that's what the data is telling you. But there's more to that than meets the eye. So here's a more simplified summary by the Search Engine Journal about what attribution means. Marketing attribution is the approach to understanding how various marketing and sales touchpoints influence the prospects, moving from visitors all the way to becoming a lead, to actually becoming a customer. So what that really looks like is the same exact concept that I talked about a couple of weeks ago with seeing marketing as a funnel. Marketing to your audience is essentially like a funnel. So at the top of the funnel, you have your top of funnel audience. These are people who aren't aware of your business or your product. The next part of the funnel is your middle of funnel. So these are people aware of your brand or product, but not necessarily engaged or bought products from you. And then bottom of the funnel are people who have actually engaged with your product or your brand. They've maybe even bought from you, from your product or your service. So they're basically in many ways a warm lead. So it's top of funnel, middle of funnel, and then bottom of funnel. So now let's talk about the different type of attribution models. This is where it gets a bit heated up because everyone has their own perspective. A lot of marketers will actually have their own preference within which attribution model they should use or business should use. And then you might have other departments talk about different attribution models that they prefer. So long story short, we all have our own biases and perspective. But let's go through it one by one. So the easiest one to understand is the last click model. This is essentially if someone buys a product from you, whatever the last channel that they used before that conversion is where the attribution goes to. So let's say if I buy a product from a website and I used a Google ad to get me to that point, Google ads will essentially be attributed to that conversion point. Even though maybe I've been introduced to that brand from a different channel, it could be a TV advert, it could be a blog, it could be a Facebook ad, it could be a tweet, but all the attribution actually go 100% to the last clicked channel. And so the second attribution model is an opposite of the last click model, which is the first click model. So again, pretty self-explanatory. This is whatever the first point of contact I have with that website before the conversion point is where all the attribution will go to. Let's say before I got to buying a product, I went through different digital marketing channels, from first visiting your website organically and then clicking on a Google ads and then clicking on an ad within Google search, and then it could be seeing your ad on Twitter, then seeing your ad on a publisher website, and then finally seeing email from you. That conversion point isn't going to go to an email or a Facebook ad. It's going to go to the first touch point, which is basically the website visit. Now we can start to see the complications, because the truth is the user journey and the user decision approach, it's a lot more complicated than the first click or last click model, and hence a lot of digital marketers tend not to really utilize those models, but it's good to know and understand those fundamentally, because those are the most basic ones. So the third type of attribution model is linear. This is pretty basic. Let's assume there were 5 different touch points before an attribution or a conversion or a purchase. All those different channels would essentially have equal attribution percentage. So let's say if it's 5, that would mean every channel will have a 20% attribution for that particular conversion point. From my point of view, I feel like that's a very wrong way of seeing attribution, right? Why would you equate every single channel as 20% when you know that maybe one specific channel didn't really contribute to the sale, right? The next attribution model is a time decay attribution model, which is essentially being able to attribute most of your percentage of attribution towards the channel that was closest to that conversion point, irrelevant of than other channels that came prior. So again, there's a bias to that, right? Because let's say I could go on a website and I really want to buy a product from that particular website, but I was looking at the website around April, but then I knew that I wanted to get a discount from that particular website. So I know fundamentally that I might have to wait till Black Friday, which is around November time. So you can imagine that's a long leeway, that's a couple of months, right? And then let's say all of a sudden I see a Facebook ad or I receive an email from that company, they have 50% of the product, I buy the product, that attribution is likely going to go to a Facebook ad or your email. When in truth, the actual decision making came prior to that, which was organically from your website. So again, it's an attribution model that shows a bit of the truth, but it shouldn't rely on it 100%. Is the position-based model, or some people call it the U-shaped attribution model, which is pretty much what it says on the tin. It's going to attribute most of the conversion to the first and last click before the conversion point, and everything in between that has a lower percentage, if that makes sense. And then the final attribution model is what everyone pretty much uses 90% of the time, especially in 2023, which is your data-driven attribution model. Now, the hard thing about this is that because it's algorithmic based or machine learning based, there's not really a lot of explanation how to elaborate on how that is explained. The only way to explain is that the algorithm decides where the attribution is most relevant. And I'm sure if I were to assume how it got to that point, it would be a couple of factors, from what was the channel that person maybe visited the most prior to conversion. It could also be what particular channel showed the most impressions or traffic before that conversion. Or if it's a repeat purchasing customer, understanding how do they usually convert. Is it through an email? Is it through an ad? Is it organically? Is it through a referral? Is it through social media? So I think that data-driven is generally the attribution you want to use as a company, but making sure that you're still neutral about understanding that it's not 100% accurate. It might be 50% accurate, it might be less than that, it might be more. Here's the thing about attribution models, right? It's only an insight, it's a perspective to the truth, but it's not the whole truth. So finally, let's talk about what the problem is with attribution, right? Because we know that it isn't perfect, we know that everyone has different perspectives, and we know that the user journey is really complicated, especially understanding what went to their decision making before they converted. So the first one is, as I mentioned, the customer journey is really complicated, especially if it's a customer that's seeing your brand for the first time. It's very likely that they won't purchase from you within a couple of weeks or even months or even years, right? Especially the higher price point of product or services, there's more of a lag time from initial touch point all the way to them actually converting. So in that sense, it's hard to understand what really contributed to the conversion point, right? Because the user journey is complicated. They're likely going to do a lot of research through a lot of different channels. How can you say that one particular channel contributed to that attribution when the journey is complicated, especially in the decision making, right? And then the second point to that, what's wrong with attribution models, is that apart from the user journey being complicated, our decision making is very complicated too. And that's something we can really decipher. It's not something we can codify and break down, because there's a lot of elements to it. There's an emotional based aspect to it. There's a timing based aspect to it. There's an economic and external environment that's related to it. It's not like everyone's life is completely surrounded by digital marketing channels. There are things that we don't see viewership on. Third problem with attribution models is that data acquisition all the way to being passed through another channel or another platform loses some of its quality, i.e. it's not as accurate as possible. So imagine you might have a platform that's based on a last click model. Within 7 or 20 days, they might not count it as an attribution within their channel, and then it gets passed onto another platform, and then it might get passed onto another platform or another analytics software. So all that data being passed on and aggregated basically means that your data isn't as accurate. It's almost like me telling information to someone and then that person passing it on someone else. At some point, the actual insight lowers in data and in context. So that's the same thing with data, especially in attribution. So the next problem with attribution models and in attribution in general is not talked about as much. The fact is, every single person has their own biases, right? They believe and agree on the things that they have a conscious agreement to already internally, or otherwise known as unconscious bias. So again, you might have paid advertising people saying that, again, attribution comes from paid advertising, whereas someone who works under search engine optimization will say, we believe SEO is the reason why this person converted. And then you might have salespeople say, well, they actually converted because I sold them the product. We jumped on a call for an hour and they signed a contract a week after, so I'm the reason why that particular person became a customer. So again, there's different biases, and keep that in mind whenever you look at attribution. So the next point is that the brain automatically likes to oversimplify things. Everything in life, that's the whole point of the brain, is that it wants to find the path of least resistance, so it's going to oversimplify everything we see. So it's going to oversimplify everything we see and everything that we understand about data, especially, right? Especially if it's complicated. It's the same thing with attributions, where sometimes we just want to agree with what insight that we see in front of us. We don't really dare challenge it. Sometimes we don't question it, but there's more to it than that. Again, oversimplification doesn't necessarily mean that you're right or that the data that you see is right. It's just a perspective. So the next one is very similar to the point that I made previously, which is that data being passed on to different channels loses its quality, but at the same time, data that you get can be incomplete, right? Especially a prime example of that is, if you have app conversions within an iOS based device or an iPhone, if the user doesn't want to be tracked, that data, that conversion point will not be passed on to your mobile measurement partner, or it might not even be passed on to you. So how can you attribute that conversion if the data isn't there? So again, problem with attribution models is that the data that you get is essentially incomplete. So the next point is related to the previous point about having incomplete data, is that with user privacy becoming more and more important and a lot of channels abiding by it, especially considering that at some point cookies will likely disappear. I'm not too sure about that yet. There's a lot of user privacy issues and tracking limitations for every single platform. Again, there's no 100% attribution, as I mentioned earlier. And so that's one of the problems with attribution models, is that there's a lot of limitations with tracking, and that goes the same with basic stuff like, especially if you're a company that has 100 different conversion points, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single conversion is being tracked accurately. There might be conversions that you miss, and that's something I even experienced working at an agency working for BMW, where we had more than 30 conversion points, and then we realized, because of the fact that we're not seeing every conversion point individually, there was one conversion that wasn't tracking for about 2 months. So you can imagine the problem of that, and the scale of that problem. The bigger the company gets and the more complex and large data that you have to play with. And then finally, which is I think one of the more important reasons why attribution model can be a problem in terms of deciphering what the truth is that there are external factors that you have to think about whenever you're looking at data. Because data is very intrinsic, right? It's a perspective you see from the inside, whereas you're not thinking of external factors that contribute to that data. So let's say if a company starts to see dwindling performance, or their performance gradually goes down, it might not be the fact that there's no data. It might not be a website issue. It might not be the fact that there's more competitors within your space. It could be the fact that there's an economic crisis. So whenever you're analyzing data and you're looking at these different attribution models, always think about external factors and what might affect that data. So to get more practical, let's close out the video with finding ways to actually fix attribution systems and attribution models. So I'm going to provide you proactive ways to actually improve your data analysis within attribution systems, so you can actually fix your insights and give you better, more informed decisions for your business and within your digital marketing needs. We'll breeze through this fairly quickly. Point 1, accept that attribution is only an insight. Second point, attribution models are bias boosters. Third point, find ways to ask your customers versus relying on analytics. So this is an important point, right? So rather than just seeing the data within your dashboard, actually survey your customers. Understand, why did you buy from us? What channel did you use before buying our product? Think of other ways to analyze data so it becomes more accurate. Don't just accept what's in front of you. Fourth point, think of user acquisition from a funnels point of view. So again, as I've mentioned earlier, marketing or user journey is really a user's conversion point. There's always a journey attributed to it, right? From top of funnel, middle of funnel, all the way to bottom of funnel. So keep that in mind whenever you're looking at your attributions. Fifth point is combine quantitative and qualitative analysis. So whenever we're looking at data or attribution model, it's very quantitative, it's very number driven. We don't think about external factors that come to it. So part of doing that is, as I mentioned earlier, like survey your customers. As a team, as a business, start to communicate as a group, understand what is everyone's department doing, how are they affecting the business, how are you guys affecting each other as well, right? And then finally, supports the previous point that I made, unify everyone's perspective and insight within the company. So be able to really create a more cohesive story, a more cohesive output within your analysis of your attributions or your conversion points, right? Rather than seeing it from your perspective because you work in marketing, you think marketing is all the reason why you're getting conversions. Understand that maybe your dev team added a new feature, retain more customers, and that that particular conversion point to increase week on week. It could be that your salespeople has a new script, all of a sudden you're closing more marketing qualified leads, right? So the more of a collaboration and connection you have as a team, not just within digital marketing, but as a whole business, the more accurate insight and actions you can take with that data. So my question to you is, what attribution model do you use on a day-to-day basis? Why? And do you use any specific tools to gather more accurate insights? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave your answers in the comment below. Let's chat. Until next time, thank you for watching the video. Peace and love, always.